Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome home, everybody. I hope I hope it's not too late for you. 8:30. Some of you, I know it's your first time here. Welcome to you. For those of you coming back, those of you who brought your children with you, may Allah Ta'ala accept. I recognize for many of us it's the time where our children are going to sleep, but we made the effort to come out. May Allah accept and make these sessions beneficial for all of us, inshallah. Without any delay, I want to start, inshallah, today because there's a lot that we could speak about. And I do hope that we will cover many important and beneficial topics over the next few weeks, inshallah. So, before I even start, I want to make a sort of introductory remark about some of you might be wondering, why is it that this is not being live streamed? Because maybe some of you were like, it would have been a lot more convenient if you just live streamed it. Why did you have to restrict that? And the explanation for that is, I think it's really important as parents that we come together and connect with other parents. For those of us who are parents, it's really important that we come together and connect with others for multiple reasons. But really, one of the foundational reasons is so that in the world that we live in, the society that we live in, where often our values differ from the vast majority of people around us, it's important that we have circles of people who share our values. People that understand and sympathize with our struggles, so that we can ask for their suggestions, we can learn from them, they may learn from us, and we can benefit in community, inshallah. And you can't do that online. If you're online, you may listen and learn something perhaps. So I'm not saying there's no benefit online. But at Wijhah, one of our main focuses is for things to come together in person. We see ourselves as a grassroots initiative and effort. Our goal is not to try to, propagate whatever it is that we're doing here to the world and neglect our local community. The focus is the immediate community around here, and it's hard. I know it's much more convenient to be at home and just turn on the live stream and tune in, but the benefit that we get by coming in person and meeting others around us is very different. And also, I hope that at junctures we can share our thoughts if there's something that comes up, or questions, inshallah. So I hope you'll continue to join us, inshallah, in the coming weeks in person. May Allah Ta'ala accept from all of us. Some introductory notes here. The first point I want to make is that as a parent, I'm struggling like the rest of you. I'm not sitting here because I have it all figured out. I'm not sitting here because my children are perfect and will turn out perfect and I am doing everything right. This is a very important, I think, point to make here. I don't believe any one person has all the answers to what is happening with your child. And so I don't sit here as some type of expert on this topic that is going to tell you what you're doing wrong, or what you need to do that you may not always already be doing. So I'm not trying to tell you how to raise your child. I'm not telling you that. I am not the parent. I don't know your child the way that you know your child. And so my hope is that you'll listen to what we're talking about, you'll reflect on it, and it'll give you a moment of pause where you might reevaluate what you're doing. And you might even consider trying it with your child. And it might work, and it might not. All right? So it's really important to take what I'm saying not so prescriptively as do this, as much as it may just be a different perspective that we've never considered. And I think a lot of us, we have this kind of mindless and perhaps even somewhat I guess mindless is the word I'm looking for here. A mindless way of going about parenting. We're just going through the motions. And my hope is that these sessions can be moments of pause where we say, wait, let me reflect on my current approach. Let me take a moment to reflect on, is there something I can grow and improve on? Right? Because sometimes life moves so fast, especially as a parent, that you don't have that moment to pause and say, wait, maybe there's something I could change or adjust. Right? So inshallah, I hope that these sessions will serve that purpose. And one of the final points I'm hoping is that you'll realize you're not alone in your struggles. As much as, and we are a society of the spectacle, where people like to present facades. Everyone wants to act like their kid's doing great, and that they as parents have got the perfect, work-life balance. That's how people present themselves. That, the day they prepare a healthy lunch for their child, they post on social media to convince the world that they're just feeding healthy food to their children all the time. And everybody else sees that and goes, what a terrible parent I am. I just gave them Oreos. Right? So, everybody's struggling. And no one can make the claim that they're not. They don't often wonder, am I doing something wrong? Am I doing something right? Can I do something better? Right? Every parent ideally would be doing this. Every parent. And they should be doing this. So no matter how you see people around you presenting themselves, right, we're all struggling. And I hope that coming together, we can connect with others whom we might not feel so alone in our struggles and may take inspiration in growth, inshallah. And so I want us to approach with that more positive and optimistic mindset. We're not here to learn all the things we're doing wrong and the ways that we've traumatized our children. That's not what these sessions are. These are sessions for how can we do better? Let's do the best we can, right? I'm sure, you're probably doing the best you can right now. To the best of your understanding, given your capacity and schedule, but there's always room for improvement, and let's see if we can learn some different ways to think about things. The overall topics that I hope to cover, this is not a course, so it's not like in 6 weeks we're going to finish. This is going to be an ongoing series that may extend 8, 10, 12 weeks, I'm not sure, depending on the content. And so this will be a weekly series, inshallah, where we explore different topics related to these general topics, inshallah. To start off, though, I'm not going to start with any of these because I want us to kind of ease into the discussion surrounding parenting. For that, I want to draw upon an article. Some of you might be familiar with this article, some of you might not be. This is an article that at one point in the Muslim community was very, very popular. This was written by a woman from California by the name of Sister Hina Khan Mukhtar. And it was published, it was shared around on the internet. Many people read it, many people found great benefit in it. And I want to go, and she essentially outlines 10 tips. 10 tips that I think are really helpful for us as we start off these sessions and the series, before we get into more structured conversations around parenting. Because a lot of us will come and we're not really in the mindset, right, the headspace to think about parenting even. My hope is that these 10 points will give us like some concrete things that right from the beginning we can walk away with something. And then we can get into some more conceptual and theoretical topics, inshallah, afterwards. So, Hina Khan Mukhtar, she lives in California. She at one point ran this very unique, I'm not sure if she still does, this very unique homeschooling initiative, mashallah. I believe it was called Ilm Academy. And I know her children, her sons. Random. Last year, when I was in Turkey, we were in Turkey with a group with Wijhah. And it was in Konya, I remember. And we just come out from visiting the tomb of the great Maulana Jalaluddin al-Rumi, rahimahullahu ta'ala. And as we're walking as a group to the bus, someone calls out my name, or just gets my attention. I look and it's her son. So I went to go talk to him, and I just talked to him, and then I'm like, yeah, like how's your mother doing? Like, is she still going around giving talks and stuff? And he's like, she's right there. And I look and I was like, oh, there she's right there. So it was just like a random meeting. I don't know her personally, but I think her article is really profound. And so I want to go through some of the points, inshallah, and we can reflect on them. In your own time afterwards, inshallah, you can go and search up this article called Raising Children with Deen and Dunya, and you can read it, inshallah, for yourself. But I want to talk about some of the tips that she gave. So she starts, and I want to give some context that she gives at the beginning of the article. Um, her first child was born in 1997. And how many of you were not alive in 1997? Just a quick question. How many of you are not even alive? Yeah, mashallah. You know? These are the 2000 babies here. A lot of y'all. Mashallah. So her first child was born in 1997. And at that time, she mentions there weren't that many books on parenting for Muslims. I mean, today when you go online, there are entire bookstores. There's Muslim publishers. So we're very privileged now. 28 years later, that we have access to so many books and translations of books. You can think about 20 years ago, in the English language, books were not so common, right? So she wanted to, look for advice and guidance. So she did the best thing that she could do in her shoes. She says that she would observe the different Muslim families she would encounter. And she would encounter the families and especially the children. Wherever she noticed that there would be these children who would be somewhat grown up, and they seemed to be doing really well, not only religiously, but also socially or academically. She said wherever she encountered families like that and children like that, she always would go and kind of do like this informal interview with the parents to ask them, what worked for you? What were the things you did that led to or contributed to at least your children, ending up as I see them? And she would do this. She writes, I would do this every time I would meet a family whose children were quite impressive when it came to balancing both what we call deen and dunya, if you make that dichotomy, right? And she says that initially she had this feeling like in her heart that like, it's almost like if I really prioritize deen, I'm probably going to sacrifice something in the dunya with these children. Like they won't do so well. They're going to have to sacrifice something in the world, and they won't be as successful as others. Or if I really prioritize their studies and academics and dunya, what we call dunya, that their deen will suffer. So she kind of felt initially before interviewing all these families that she kind of felt like she had to pick one. But when she met these families, she said they seemed to kind of disprove what I was assuming. Their children seemed to, mashallah, be doing quite well on both. At least for her own standards. She was satisfied with the progress they made on both. And so she noted these patterns, which she essentially gathered in these 10 tips. These are the 10 things she said kept coming up. As she would talk to these families, it's like, majority of them would have very similar tips and advice. And so she put them together in this article. And so I hope to, inshallah, explore the 10 tips and, kind of reflect on them a little bit. The very first one she said, parents emphasized dua, dua, dua. Now let's pause and step back. As parents, one of the things that I think we can all admit is often there's a lot of anxiety surrounding parenting. There's this fear we have of what if I do it wrong? What if I get it wrong? What will happen? How are they going to turn out? And we can really, become very paranoid about how they're doing or how they might turn out. And this can lead to some very harmful parenting strategies. That anxiety can push us to behave in ways that are counterproductive. Because when you feel uncertain And anxious, you try to gain a sense of control. So then what you try to do is control every variable. And this can lead to helicopter parenting. This, what's called, we'll talk about that later, helicopter parenting. This can lead to what's called bulldozer parenting. Because you become obsessed with trying to, quote unquote, guarantee the child's success. The reality that all of us know in the depths of our heart is you cannot guarantee that success. Then how do you deal with that anxiety? Right? How do you go to sleep at night and the thought crosses your mind? Because maybe you hear some story, right? We hear stories and we always get really worried about our children. We hear a story about someone whose son or daughter ended up leaving Islam and living a certain lifestyle, and we think, what if my son? What if my daughter? We tell ourselves, no, it won't happen, but it happened to them. And we become anxious. How do you go to sleep after that? You start asking yourself, what can I do better? How can I make sure that they never leave Islam? And we want to control more. She writes, the common trait amongst these parents, she noticed, is that they would repeatedly say, whatever goodness you see in our children, it's not because of us. It's not because of us. It's because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is foundational anchoring for every parent here, including myself. It's that we are all means. We are all sabab. We are all means here. Allah is the Rabb. He is the Rabb. And the word Rabb and tarbiyah, which we use to talk about nurturing and raising children, tarbiyah. Scholars mention how they have a etymological root in common. Ibn Ashur, he defines Rabb as, or tarbiyah rather, as tablighu shay' ila kamalihi shay'an fa shay'an. He says it is to take something to completion slowly and gradually. Parenting, we are the means, but the one that truly guides and brings about the outcomes and results is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is meant to be a great source of comfort for us. So that you don't put all this pressure on yourself to guarantee the outcome. Because sometimes when you do that, you start to become overbearing and over-controlling, and you hinder the growth of your child. Because you're trying to be God. You're trying to be God in their life. You won't let them fail. You won't let them take a step where they might get hurt. No, because I want to guarantee the outcome. Allah tells us, you must trust me. وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُتَوَكِّلُونَ. And there's no way around it, by the way. There's no way around it. Humans have tried to work around that. I don't want to trust Allah. I want to trust all the measures and the means I take. They end up with children that are extremely sheltered, don't know how to take risks, don't know how to face failure, because they've never had an experience like that. Their parents just kept them. And then the relationship between parents and children often is terrible too, because the children are like, my parents just never gave me a moment to breathe. I'm telling you, I have heard of parents, and I've mentioned it before probably, I've heard of parents. I think Anas knows who I'm talking about. He would stand outside the door of his children, like at the washroom, and time everything, and be like, why are you taking so long? Why this? It's like the lack of trust. Standing at the door, how long are you taking? What are you doing inside? Get out. Because we need to guarantee that the child doesn't at all get up to any wrong ever. What kind of effect does that have on the psyche of the child? And we saw that. I saw how that child turned out. Not like a terrible rebel, I'm not saying, but nowhere near what the parent was hoping. Because that's not healthy. Right? So, but why did he do that? Because he couldn't control his anxiety. Because he couldn't live with the uncertainty, and the advice given here is dua. You know what I find so fascinating? Amongst all the people Allah could have said, their dua is not rejected, Allah chose parents. Right? It could have been a teacher, but He didn't say teacher. The du'as, some people's du'as are just always accepted, just not rejected. You have the traveler, you have the one who's madhloom, the oppressed, but you also have who? The parent. Subhanallah. As a parent, that's meant to be a source of comfort. That, okay, I have to trust Allah in this matter. How do I know Allah hears my concern? Let me make dua. But what if my dua is not accepted? Allah told you, as a parent, your dua will be accepted. Dua, dua, dua. And this also really balances us as parents. Where if our children do really well, we don't become arrogant and start looking down at others. Oh, your son is that university? Okay, yeah. Well, my son is, alhamdulillah. You don't do that. You don't do that because it's not from us. Tawfiq is from Allah. And I have seen parents really beat themselves up for the decisions that their adult children make. And children have, when they grow up, they have free will. They will choose what they want. No doubt, the upbringing plays a role, but you can't guarantee it. And Allah teaches us these lessons in the Quran. I don't want to, go deep into this. Maybe later on we'll speak about it. But He tells us the story of the Prophet Nuh. That is a prophet. And this prophet, remember, prophets Allah chooses as people who are perfect in their ability to nurture human beings and to guide them. And yet, being perfect as this guide, this prophet, sinless, his son, Allah had destined, would not accept. That's not a failure. It's very important. That's not a failure on the part of the Prophet Nuh. That is Allah's qadr. What Allah decreed. And so then the individual does not just completely destroy themselves. Recognizing that my child ultimately when they grow up will have free will to choose what they choose. But then also, sometimes we get really paranoid that, oh my God, in my house things are not perfect. I don't know why my spouse is like this, and we complain about this, that. And we think that, because things are not perfect, my child is doomed. You ever seen that? But then you have the story of the Prophet Musa in the house of Fir'aun he's raised. I mean, is there any worse household to be in than to witness a man like Fir'aun every single day? To see him, right? What role model is that father, or father figure at least? And yet Musa turned out to be the Prophet Musa. Because when Allah guides, He guides in the house of Fir'aun. And when He chooses that someone should not be guided, He will leave them, even if they are in the house of a prophet. That is not to say that we don't have responsibility, no. It's to say, don't think that you own the results. May Allah give me tawfiq to understand this. And may He give all of us tawfiq to understand this. That our power and our superpower in this situation is dua. Constant dua. And not only dua, Ya Allah, make them successful, but also when we're feeling lost as to how to navigate. Because we have those moments. Ya Allah, my child has this behavior. I don't know what to do. I asked the Imam, he said something, I don't know. Right? Maybe he seemed pretty lost too. Because he doesn't understand my situation at home. And we feel like we don't know how to navigate. That's also dua. Ya Allah, I don't know how to help my child. Show me the way. Open the path for me to know what the next step is here. Allow me to meet someone who might be able to guide me and help me in this situation. Right? Put in my heart that which would be best in this situation with my child. And that's demonstrating to Allah, Ya Allah, I acknowledge I don't own the results. I don't determine the outcome. I trust you, Ya Allah. And the way that quells one's anxieties is powerful. Because what you're saying is, Ya Allah, I'm not trying to own the outcome. I am entrusting it to you. I'm going to do my best. But I know it's in your control. So then you don't try to control the outcome. You sit back. Ya Allah, it's yours. And so she notes that at every situation there is a way of practically turning to Allah. Your child does good in life. Right? Something happens and they succeed and they do well in life, in deen or dunya, whatever it is. What do? We don't sit and gloat. Shukr. That's part of, Ya Allah, I'm grateful to you that today I got to see this in my life. Right? And it's also powerful when you're grateful. Because you acknowledge the good that your children do. And because of Allah's blessing. So it brings you closer to your children and brings you closer to Allah. If something goes wrong, Ya Allah, you make istighfar. Ya Allah, forgive me for my shortcomings in this. When is a moment of uncertainty, Salatul Hajjah, you turn and you pray the prayer of need. Ya Allah, you pray 2 rak'ahs and you make dua. Ya Allah, I really don't know. Please help me as I move forward. She mentions that these parents would make dua for the halal livelihood of their children when they grow up. Not just, Ya Allah, get them into the best universities. Ya Allah, because the goal is not just getting into a university. The goal is, Ya Allah, when they earn money, let it be halal. And subhanAllah, she talks about how making so much dua, one of the families, the son eventually was looking for a job, and these opportunities arose, but they all involved some haram. And the son kept turning it down. I can't take this job. It involves begging alcohol. Can't take this job. And he kept turning down them. And ultimately then Allah opened up a way and he got a halal, job. And so we understand that not only the child's current upbringing, but their future is in the control of Allah. So I make dua not only for the present, but for the future of my child. Ya Allah, grant them halal income. Ya Allah, grant them pious spouses. Right? Making dua for that. Not that you sit there and you're trying to matchmake at 3 years old. Right? May Allah help us when we sit there and do that with these kids. Right? SubhanAllah. No, we make dua, Ya Allah, grant them a pious spouse going forward. And see, this is very powerful, this overall idea of dua. Why? Because I want you to imagine a parent, on the one hand, that's extremely anxious about their child. How does that affect the house environment, the home environment? How does it affect that? The parent is going to be hyper vigilant, constantly on top of their child. What are you doing? Why'd you do that? How could you mess that up? It's an overly simplistic mentality to think that and I've seen this, if I just fix all the mistakes my child makes, they'll turn out perfect. You ever seen that? They think if I just correct everything, they'll not do anything wrong and then they'll be perfect and I'll be a great parent. Right? And that's not how it works. Your child starts avoiding you because they don't want to be criticized. And they don't become perfect, they become really good at hiding stuff from us. That's what they become really good at. And then we get deceived into thinking, wow, they never do anything wrong anymore. I must be a great parent. Right? The confirmation bias we were looking for. May Allah, here's another very important point that's related. When we make dua and recognize Allah controls outcomes, we don't put our worth into our children. Because that's a big mistake. Because now you're burdening the child with your worth. My son, you better turn out good. Because if you don't, I'm going to feel like a terrible human being. Wow. Oh, that child did not sign up for that responsibility. But when we make tawakkul, even if our child turns out well, we don't say, I'm great because of that. We say, Ya Allah, you are Al-Kareem. And if my child is not as good as I want them to be, again, Ya Allah, you are Al-Kareem. I don't let that affect my self-worth. I don't put that burden of self-worth on the child. Tawakkul is such a powerful force, and it is essential in this relationship, parent-child relationship. Does that make sense? And you can see how this is a foundational point for everything we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about one more, inshallah, and we'll stop. And obviously, these topics will come up again as we go through a more structured exploration of these topics. But she writes the point number 2 that she heard consistently between among these parents was your company, the suhbah. That suhbah in general, companionship, will make you or break you. Now, immediately when we hear this, a lot of us will say, oh yeah, I know this one. I'm aware of this one. Right? Because we're like, yeah, who are my child's friends? And no doubt, this is a very important point. I'm not going to belabor the point here. Many of us are aware of the Prophet ﷺ's hadith where he said, a person is on the religion of their friend. Al-mar'u ala dini khalili, falyanzur ahadukum man yukhalil. So look at who you keep as your friends. We've heard sayings like, you are the sum total of your 5 closest friends. We've heard verses in the Quran where Allah Ta'ala speaks about people on the Day of Judgment who will say, Ya Allah, I wish I never made friends with this person. ويوم يعض الظالم على يدي يقول يا ليتني اتخذت مع الرسول سبيلا يا ويلتى ليتني لم أتخذ فلانا خليلا لقد أضلني عن الذكر بعد إذ جاءني. Right? So we hear all this, and so I'm not going to go too in depth on this point. But she writes something really interesting. She says, it's not just the friends that your children have. Your friends will also impact your child. We don't often think about that. We think about, let me make sure my children have good friends. But we don't think, wait, when my friends come to my house, are they going to have a positive influence on my children or a negative influence? They might have children or they might not have children. But if they're hanging out with me and in the presence of my children will observe. And sometimes we're a lot more lax with our friends when we're hanging out with them than we are when we are in parenting mode with our children. So with our children, we say, you can never say this word. Right? You can never say this word. Right? How many? I don't want to say the word. Some small children here. Some of you are like, yeah, the Shaykh himself is saying these words. No, but S-T-U-P-I-D. You know what I'm talking about? Right? I hope, inshallah, you tell your children, don't say it. For them right now in my house, it's like the F word. You can't say it. All right? So, but imagine you teach your children that, and when they say it, you kind of look at them and say, hey, we don't say that, or something like that. And then your friend comes over, and your friend is saying perhaps even worse than that. And the whole time your child is looking at you like, what are they saying? And you're not going to be the friend that says, hey, don't say that, right? Because you're just policing their language at this point. So what do? She talks about how it's not just about language, for example. It's even religiosity. What happens when, you have a friend of yours that let's say you don't get influenced by. Let's just say they come to your house, maybe the two of you bond over a sport or some type of hobby. But maybe when they talk about religion, they kind of go, yeah. Are you going to the halaqah? Okay, sure. You have time for that? Okay. And your child hears these little comments and remarks about the role of religion in the lives of families. You don't think that's going to rub off on the child? I think it's a very profound point she's making here. It's not, because we often think what? My child and their friends. And we often overlook, but who are my friends? Because just like my children look up to me, they will look at my friends as well to see what kind of people they are. And so she talked about how one time she and her husband, they moved to this one area, and there weren't that many Muslims in the area. But they met some, and they were just happy to meet Muslims. Because, there are areas in America that I'm sure you're aware of. There's not that many Muslims, especially 28 years ago. So just to meet someone who's Muslim was like a big thing, let alone what level of religiosity was kind of irrelevant for them. It was just like, I just met a Muslim. That's great. But in the conversations, they started to notice that these are Muslims, but they don't really hold the same religious values that we hold. So they kind of, look down upon people who take religion too seriously. They think, oh, what are you doing? Come on. It's not that serious. We can miss prayers. There's no emphasis on prayers at these gatherings. And she said one time, one of her brothers pulled her aside and said, hey, you need to find new friends. And she said initially she was very offended. She's like, what do you mean? Why are you so judgmental? But she says later on I reflected and I realized he was so right. Because while I may have ignored those little jibes and the little comments, she's like, but my children were hearing them all along. Now she said, but she faced a problem. She's like, but we don't have that many Muslims. And she says it comes back to dua. She says you have to make dua. Ya Allah, just like you make dua that your children, have good futures and have good friends, make dua, Ya Allah, surround me with good friends. Ya Allah, surround me with good friends. Again, that's one of the reasons why we're hoping to come together as a community. That you might find people around you that think about parenting in the way that you do. That are looking for guidance spiritually when it comes to parenting like you are. Because maybe there's some parents that but they don't actually care about any of this. For them, it's all a matter of just get them into the best university, make sure they know how to use AI, right? But you're thinking, no, I gotta make sure that they remain human, that they don't become a robot and behave like a robot and operate like a robot. And so, she then extends this point. She says something really, again, profound, I think. She says, not only do you need to worry about your children's company, like their peers, but you also need to worry about your peers. And then she said, there's another form of company that we don't think about. And that is the company of elders in your family. Elders in your family. Grandparents, aunts, uncles. The influence they can have on your children. And it's not just what they teach the children. But she says she observed, because she said her children did not grow up in an area or in a house where her parents or her husband's parents were around. But in the families where the children grew up in the presence of these elderly family members, these children were very considerate. They were very mindful of how others should be treated. Are you showing respect? Are you making sure that you go when they call you, you go and listen? It's your grandfather, it's your grandmother. Make sure you go and listen. These are etiquettes, and that teach them something about the world. There's a really good book that I would recommend on this topic about children learning primarily from their parents and the elders around them, because it's very important. They need guidance. It's a book called Hold On to Your Kids. Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Peers. And it's by Gabor Mate, and I think it's Gordon Neufeld. And it's the same idea. Is that as children grow older, they get to a point, usually we see that they get to a point where they start to really value what their peers say even more than their parents. And our society is designed to kind of enable that. Because these children spend so much time with their peers in school. So naturally, that's kind of what they end up focusing on. But it's the blind leading the blind. How many of you in high school received terrible advice from your classmates? In retrospect, where you're like, man, I didn't know what to do, couldn't go to my parents, so I asked my friend. Yeah, I shouldn't have asked my friend, right? Because they gave me terrible advice, because they didn't know what to do either. To remain an active influence in the lives of your children. This is something she very much emphasizes. Now you're going to ask me, how do you do that? And we're going to talk about that, inshallah, when we get to the point of communication and emotional attachment. But yeah, a lot of emphasis. And the final point she makes about company. she talks about the power of young mentors. And I'm sure most of us at some point probably experienced something like this, even if it was very indirectly. Young mentors, where it's someone who may not be at the age of the parent, but they're not at the age of the child either. They're in the middle, right? So for example, in my family, I have my nephew. My son looks up to my nephew so much, right? And anyone who came on the recent Umrah trip saw that. My son always wanted to hang out with my nephew, my brother's son. And I then realize I just now need to direct my attention to my nephew. And it's like, don't make him a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, right? He's a big Maple Leafs fan. I'm like, what are you wasting my time? Don't misguide my child here, right? Sorry, Leaf fans. Some of you didn't like that joke, right? But you get the point I'm making here? I will say the same thing to my son, but when my nephew says it, he's like, okay, let's go do it. Okay, that's fine, right? As long as my nephew's saying the right thing. The idea here is, in life, there's going to be these younger mentors that can have a positive influence on these children. And if we have people like that in our communities, they're very valuable people. And you might be that person for the child, for someone else's child right now. You might be that person. Because you might not be as old as this guy or girl's parents, but you're older than the guy or girl. There's a high schooler, for example, right? So now you're not a high schooler, but you might not be as old as the high schooler's parents. So they might look up to you, because maybe you're family friends. They might look up to you, and you could have a very positive influence on them. Such people are very valuable. To seek them out, to kind of enable that connection so that your child, who is more receptive naturally to that young mentor, the company of that young mentor, that they can benefit from them. I know for many parents here in the community, I play that role. I know this because they come to me. They say, my son, my daughter, they come to Wijhah. And it seems like they've been learning something there. I say, alhamdulillah. They're like, we tell them the same thing. They don't listen to us. I'm like, it's the food we have at the back, right? No, I don't know. But yeah, you understand what I'm saying here? The idea that to really factor in all the different forms of company and companionship. Their friends, your friends, family members that are around, and even young mentors in the community that can be a positive influence. And so we'll stop here, inshallah. Next week, we're going to talk about a really important one that I think is very profound. The Prophet ﷺ was a living, breathing reality in our lives. We'll continue from this, inshallah, next week. جزاكم الله خير وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.